Hello, everybody. I am here with Jay Fairbrother. And I will first mention that my background looks different for those who are watching it on video. I am visiting my aunt's cottage in New Hampshire. So hopefully the Wi-Fi signal is strong and everything goes well. I think it will. But we have such a great topic today that is a big challenge of mine, talking about our prices as coaches, course creators, service-based entrepreneurs, people, and people who want to be of service and therefore hate to ask for money for what they're doing. So take it away, Jay. Tell us how to fix this problem.
I don't know if I can fix all this problem in 20 minutes. Yeah, there's no magic button. There's no easy pill. So, first of all, I struggle with my own pricing for my own services, and I actually started to even look around to, look at are there things out there which help with that specifically for this type, a coach, a speaker, a course creator. And frankly, I couldn't find much. And really what this came out of for me to get into teaching about pricing was because over the last couple of years, one of the things that I do is sales coaching. And I specifically work with coaches and speakers in helping them get better at the one-on-one selling conversations that typically are required to get high-end coaching clients, right? You're a master at building funnels for products that might not necessarily need that high, whoops, am I still here?
You're still here.
Okay, sorry, my screen just went blank. So, I'm sorry about that. So anyway, for a lower end product, just for random purposes, say under $1,000, you can typically get people into your programs through a marketing funnel. But to get those high end clients, typically requires that selling conversation. And so I've worked with over 100 coaches over the last couple of years, one-on-one, helping them get better at those selling conversations. And my approach to that is that, most sales training that's out there and most people who are offering sales coaching for this type of audience, it's all based on corporate selling. There's a lot of people out there that's spent their career in a corporate sales environment, and now they're coaching coaches on how to sell, and it's just a different thing. I mean, the corporate selling environment is what I call more of a sort of patriarchal approach, meaning that it's often a win-lose situation. Like, I get the sale, I win, you lose kind of thing, instead of a win-win, which is how most coaches want to operate. Because we're here to help people. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked, but
that's a really good point. I hadn't ever thought of that.
Yeah. So, so my background is 30 plus years as a serial entrepreneur. I have founded, bought, and sold multiple 7-figure businesses. And throughout all of that, I've done a lot of building sales programs from scratch for companies, for employers. And I've always taken the approach of, for instance, not hiring people with prior sales experience and taking somebody, who's got some basic skills and training them in a different kind of approach. So I've been doing that for a long time. But these last couple of years working with the 100 plus coaches, invariably in those coaching conversations, I ask about their pricing. And, and in a sales conversation, how do you respond to the question, well, how much does it cost? And what I've learned through that, going through that, is that, first of all, most coaches really falter in that one-on-one selling conversation when asked about pricing. Like, you can see changes in their body language and their voice tone, and you can just see the lack of confidence when they approach that question. And in sort of digging further in, I've realized that most coaches, kind of their system for developing their prices was the equivalent of like throwing a dart against a wall. It was just, well, I kind of look around at people doing similar things, and I follow what they're doing, figuring it must be working, instead of taking a sort of systematic and strategic approach to at least factor in all the things you should think about before you create prices. And I'll just give you one little example of that, which is that I worked with a lot of coaches who, actually try to put some strategy, or I help them, in crafting pricing and packages. And then I say, and they're all happy with it, and or they've already launched it and they've got it out there going. And I'm going like, okay, well, what about affiliates? Have you thought about, because obviously a great way for us to promote ourselves is other people's audiences, right? To find JV partners and affiliates and other people to promote what we're doing. And I've just found so many situations where coaches have these prices and they're like, oh, I never even thought about, affiliate commissions. Well, maybe I can add 10% or give 10% commission. And frankly, most JV partners, especially those with any kind of a sizable list, they just aren't getting excited about 10%. You've got to think more in the lines of 30, 40% to even get their attention, sometimes even higher. So just little things like that led me to develop this new program I have called the Pricing for Profits Masterclass, where I provide a template, which I created, the ultimate pricing formula, which goes through all the things you want to factor into your pricing decisions, the way you create your packages, and tries to address some of the many mistakes that I've seen over the past couple of years coaches are making with their pricing.
That sounds fantastic. I love formulas.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this just takes into account, everything from, where you are in your journey. Are you just starting out? Do you have some traction, or, have you already, created yourself as a true expert and authority you may be an expert and authority in your own eyes, but does your, prospect base view you as that authority, that expert? Because that affects, the prices you're able to get. And just things like, your niche, what pond you're fishing in, and then your avatar, who is your ideal client and where are they at in their journey? Because it's the same thing. If I'm targeting people who are just starting out in coaching and I have a $10,000 high-end coaching program, well, certainly there are a few people out there that can, dip into their savings or whatever they're doing to do that and will take that leap, but not many. Most beginning coaches, right, they're looking for programs they can invest to at a lot lower price point. So it's just a matter of that alignment and making sure that your pricing matches where you are, where your customer is, and then start to factor in things like, what's the value of the outcome or transformation that you create. And one of the biggest fears that coaches have is, well, if I raise prices, I'm going to lose clients. And while that may be true, especially if you just willy-nilly decide to, I always say the easiest way to create more profit in your business is with a single keystroke, meaning just raise your price. But if you just do it without any justification, thought, strategy, you might lose clients. And part of the ultimate pricing formula is to look at ways that you can increase the perceived value, because that's the only thing that really matters in the end, to increase the perceived value of your offers using things like bonuses and scarcity and exclusivity and risk reversal, and really go through and say, okay, well, if I can add those kinds of things to increase the perceived value of my product or program or course, then I can raise the price and probably not lose any clients. And then the last thing I'll add on that part of it too is that with high-end coaching programs, which is kind of the holy grail for most coaches, right? We all want high-end clients and those paying us in thousands of dollars, not hundreds. In the high-end programs, a lot of times, if you raise your price, say from $2,000 to $2,500, yes, you might lose some clients, but in my experience over 30 years running all types of different businesses, typically the clients you would lose from that kind of a price jump are often the ones that aren't your ideal clients anyway. They're often the ones that end up requiring more time, more work. They're the people who might not do the work that's required to have success in your program. So sometimes, when you're talking that high end level, losing a few of those clients is actually, helping your business, not hurting your business.
Make some room. It makes room for better fits.
Yeah. Well, you think about all the time you're saving by investing in those high maintenance clients. And then, part of what we do in the masterclasses, I actually have a spreadsheet where you can play around with prices and tiered pricing and that kind of thing to kind of see what kind of effect it might have. But part of what we do is show examples of, okay, if you raise your price from 2,000 to 2,700, you'd have to lose this many clients and still be breaking even. And in most of those examples, when I do it, especially on like a coaching thing or a live thing, people's, instinct as to how many people they might lose is usually far less than what they could lose and still break even. I don't know if I explained that right.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So can you go back to the part about the value of the transformation that you're providing? Because I think that's something that's so challenging to quantify for some. Some of us have businesses where it's like a really obvious ROI, but for a lot of coaches, I don't know if they can put a number amount on the transformation.
It's a great point. And let's just say that it is more difficult, certainly, if you cannot translate that value into some kind of a dollar figure. If your value that you're providing is around lifestyle or mindset or just positioning, that kind of thing, that it is more difficult to say, well, the program is worth this much in terms of actual value. So what I do in my sales coaching is we talk a lot about painting the picture of what that transformation looks like and what outcome, how that changes their life. And I'll just give, one sort of example is that, maybe your coaching or program helps people to, move in their career. So, what I coach people to do is then have that conversation of, okay, well, let's say this all works, right? Let's say that you get this outcome that you're looking for and that I think I can help with. What does that translate into in terms of your life? And in this case, in this particular example, maybe like, well, what's the value of that next promotion? If you move up a level in the ladder, corporate ladder, or whatever you're in, what does that look like? Are you talking an extra $10,000, $20,000 a year? And what does that look like over the next 5 to 10 years in terms of value? Again,
so you kind of get the lead to do it for you to quantify what that value is to them personally.
Absolutely. And that's one of my sales coaching, I call how to sell just like you coach. And the reason is that most coaches don't do exactly that. They think when they get in a selling conversation, suddenly it's about them pitching or them, spouting off about all their experience and expertise and process and how they accomplish what they do. And that's not what selling is about. So it's, the difference in terms of how to sell like you coach is, you as a coach, you would never show up for your initial client session with a new client and talk 70% of the time. But that's exactly what people do in those selling conversations, mostly because they're just not comfortable and they're not sure what they should be doing. But to your point, it's about asking questions. I always say the best way to look smart or appear smart to someone is not by spouting off all these wonderful things you do and all your certifications and background and experience. It's just by asking smart questions. And that's exactly the point, is that when I'm trying to relate it back to your original question of when it's tough to translate the value into like a dollar figure ROI, then it's even more important that you get your prospect or client to articulate exactly what the changes, what that positive outcome, that transformation is going to mean to them in terms of the quality of their life, and create the value around that.
Very good. So, do you have any tips for confidence, especially when you get to that point in the conversation? You say your number and you try to say it with all like, this is the price that it is. And somebody just goes, well, I can't afford that. What do you do next?
It's a great question. And I always say that in sales, and this applies to pricing as well, it's 80% confidence and 20% art. So what I mean by that is that in marketing can be a science, right? Marketing is one to many, it's one directional, whereas sales can never be a science. It's a conversation, right? So it's always an art form. But the confidence level that you approach selling and talking about your pricing can overcome an awful lot of weaknesses or things that you might not do, exactly the perfect way in a sales conversation they should be done. So I'll say it this way. In my 30 plus years of, doing sales coaching and training, I have seen many top producing salespeople that when you look at what they're actually doing, like you record their calls and review them, that you could go, on the skill part of it, like you're doing almost everything wrong, but their confidence is so over the top that it makes up for a lot of those kinds of quote unquote mistakes that they could be doing on the sales calls. Could they get better if they, added that confidence and some skill? Yes. But it really is about confidence. And that's why this program I created is really designed, if the main goal, if nothing else comes out of it, you may not even change your prices at the end of going through my program, but you will be a lot more confident in the price that you have because now you have some sort of justification and rationale and strategy behind it. So the other thing you mentioned is, what happens when people say they can't afford it. And again, there's no easy button there. But one of the things I talk about in the masterclass is that when somebody says they can't afford it, and this is really true of any sales quote unquote objection or concern that people raise, is that but it's especially true with can't afford it, is there are infinite possibilities for what I can't afford it means in any conversation. So, and the important thing to recognize is that when I say I can't afford it and you give me some, scripted response, which is how a lot of old school sales training approaches things, you're not speaking to me. You might have a 1 in, 5,000 chance that whatever your scripted response is, hits for me. But the key is that you really don't know what it means. And the key to that is to ask questions and explore exactly, what it could mean. And in my pricing masterclass, I, just give about 12 examples of what I can't afford it could mean to a person. And you really don't know until you dive in and explore that a little further. So I do give some suggested responses as samples for how to respond and how to dig into that. But yeah, again, there's no magic easy answer.
I like that answer. That makes a lot of sense. It's true. There's so many possibilities, and from that one sentence, you really can't know what's happening inside their head. So that makes sense. Ask questions. Too many people are just like, oh, money objection doesn't really mean anything, so just blast past it or something,
Yeah. Well, yeah. And the thing is that it truly is an infinite number of possibilities because my version of can't afford it is unique to me, right? My exact financial situation, my, but it involves so many other things. Like one of the big mistakes that I coach on in this program is that when people are asked pricing, often they disclose their pricing way too early in a selling conversation.
Mm.
So I always say that you should never name a price until the person you're talking to is chomping at the bit to work with you. Because anytime you name a price earlier than that moment, that price is too expensive, and they're only perceiving it as an expense because they're not they might not be convinced that you're the right person to help them yet. They might think you're great, but they're not convinced the program you're offering is right for them. And so if either of those things are in question and you name a price, it's too much. So
yeah, that's
it's important. And again, in the program, I talk about some ways that you can, if somebody asks you, too early in the conversation, well, how much does this cost, or what's your pricing, ways to kind of redirect that in by using questions, so that you're not, it doesn't look like you're evading the question, but it says, okay, well, before we get there, let's talk about and then bring in the pricing later when they're convinced. Or I always say, I use the 80-20 rule a lot. Ideally someone's 100% convinced that you're the right person and your program is right for them. If they're only 80% convinced, most people will still buy. But if it's anything less than 80% convinced that you're the right person, your program's right for them, then absolutely you're going to hear, I can't afford it, and lots of other reasons why
it's working really hard for that sale that you might regret in the end. Because maybe they did have a good reason for saying no.
Right. And right. And if you can use manipulative sales techniques to maybe get clients that aren't right for you, but in the long run, you don't want that anyway, because those are the people who are going to not do the work that you need them to do to help them, or they're just going to be the people who suck more of your time than what you've built into your program.
Yeah. Well, this sounds like a fantastic program that you've got going here. So how can people learn more about it?
Honestly, the best way is just to shoot me an email, j@fairbrother.com. And I'm doing some workshops that are free to attend here over the next couple of months. People can go to those. And Carolyn, I'll send you a link. So if you want to put it in the notes or whatever from this discussion, for anybody looking at it afterwards, they can access.
Perfect. All right. Do you have any parting advice you would like to leave us with?
I think the other thing to just keep in mind is that to factor in all the costs that you have in creating a program. And I'm not talking about the development costs. Some people take a week to develop their solution program or package. Other people take way too long, like 9 months or 10 months or a year in development before they're ready to roll. So I'm not talking about that time, but all the time it takes then to execute the program. Again, just to factor in all of that into deciding about your price, because, again, so many times people think like, okay, well, I have to show up live this many times or this many hours, so I need to make sure I get, quote unquote, compensated for that time. But then they fail to take into account all the time they're spending in follow-up and, answering questions outside of whatever you're offering, the group coaching, the packages, that kind of stuff. So we walk through all of those things. So last thing is just, you really got to spend some time thinking about all the time that you have to invest in delivering a program. And an example of that is a lot of people will design a group coaching program and they'll design their price, usually willy-nilly, just, randomly decide a price. And then, I always challenge them and say, well, what if only one or two people come into your group coaching program? How are you going to feel about the price you're charging if you don't get the 8 or 10 people that it's designed for, right? Especially when you're starting a program out. So again, it may not change anything, but you have to come to terms with that, because the last thing you want to do is, create this wonderful group coaching program, only make a couple of sales, and then the entire time you're delivering it, it's almost like you're disappointed in yourself, and you're not, totally present, and you're not, at your best, because you're like, man, I should have priced this twice as much because there's only 2 people here. So just to get your head around that.
Excellent. Well, that is a good tip too. All right. Full of great value today. Thank you so much for coming on, Jay.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. And I will see all you folks on Friday.